It's definitely steep enough that you can't stand. You're not out of the saddle on a lot of the gravel bit. Again, you're at 12,000 feet. It's hard to concentrate. It's hard to pick a line. There was one spot where I grabbed a bottle from the car. My arm was off. I kind of swerved off into the deeper part and had to save it. It's hard to explain how dumb you get at altitude. A bottle every 45 minutes and a flask every 45 minutes. That's a lot of carbs, for sure, because I think it was like probably the equivalent of 3 or 4 shots in each of those.
Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Matt Dennis with First Endurance, and I'm joined today by Phil Gaimon, former World Tour cyclist, current YouTube star, and KOM mercenary. He's also newly 40 and the sole holder of the famous Mauna Kea segment on Hawaii, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Phil, thanks for joining me.
Cheers, thanks for having me, Matt.
Absolutely. I kind of just want to start maybe before the beginning with your preparation phase. We're big at First Endurance on this idea of whatever you're going to do it well. So whether your goals are a World Tour podium, a big result at a Lifetime Grand Prix, a bikepacking trip, or just a PR on the segment outside your house, those goals are worthy of professional support and a professional level of detail, attention to detail. And I kind of think that you're the perfect ambassador for that idea, because at a base level, what you've been doing with your YouTube career is bringing a World Tour level of fitness to chasing Strava segments. And you're also, along with that, bringing a World Tour attention to detail, World Tour level of ambition. So for something like this, which is a huge effort, for people who are unfamiliar, Mauna Kea is 50 miles. It's a 4.5 hour effort for you. I mean, for me, it might be more like 6.5. You're going from sea level up to 14,000 feet. You're crossing through different climates. How far out are you deciding on a date, and how does it affect your preparation across training, heat adaptation, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's definitely like a climb that you can't just show up and hope for the best. But really, because it's so long, Mauna Kea it's really just an endurance ride. So I've kind of had, last year I did Haleakala on Maui, and really every time I've done Mauna Kea, it's kind of the same time of year. And Hawaii, weather is a big part of it, but it's kind of the same weather year-round over there, so it's not, other than it can snow at the top, which is a kicker. But basically this time of year, like November, December, I still kind of live by that's my base train, that's my endurance training from the pro years. I still kind of live on that pro arc for no reason whatsoever, other than, what's the word I'm looking for?
Muscle memory.
We got inertia. I was looking for inertia.
Yeah.
Sorry. Other than inertia, there's no reason for me to do that arc, but that's what I do. And so I do my endurance riding November, December, and then January will be like my long climb goal for my video. And then after that, I'll kind of sharpen it and focus on, here's my next 15-minute climb. But yeah, so it was endurance training. It was sweet spot. It was just long, hard zone, 2 hours. And in a perfect world, I would try to adapt to the elevation because it is so high at the end. But the thing is, no one's adapted to 13,000 feet at the top, and you're only at the 7,000 for like an hour, maybe. So I actually don't know if it's valuable. I've never been able to do it from altitude because the winter I'm not going to Big Bear.
Right.
And I'm not sure how beneficial it is, how much it matters for literally it's a few hours total that you're over 7,000 feet. And then you're in just no man's land of basically you're in space by the top. No one's breathing.
Are you doing anything heat related, trying to adapt in that way, just to get used to the different climates you're going to encounter on the climb?
Yeah, that's the new thing, and I think like the heat adaptation does a lot of, or at least some of what altitude used to, or there's a Venn diagram there. So I just do that year round. We have a sauna. Kind of got that for my wife because she likes the sauna, and then I'm like, oops, benefits.
Yeah,
so I'm in there too. There's room for two.
Hey, yeah, it's one of those win-wins. Everybody gets some benefit. Yeah. And then, what about nutrition? Does anything change, or do you eat fairly disciplined all year? Are you eating more? Or are you getting a little more in on the bike, trying to gut train for the amount of carbs you're going to consume on the day of the effort itself?
Yeah, definitely. Like as I was doing, I'd do like one sort of big sweet spot endurance ride, try to do 4,000, 5,000 kilojoules once a week. Was kind of that was how I set up my build. And for that one, I'm pounding the high carb First Endurance EFS and the gels, and just trying to basically just simulate the calorie expenditure and the fueling for that day. But it's just it's kind of the same as always. This is how much I can do per hour, and I know it, and that's what I do on the day. So it's sort of the nice thing about my situation is it's very predictable, it's very controlled. So I go back to the car and I'm like, all right, Emily's my wife. Give me a bottle. It's been 45 minutes, and I just do that over and over.
Perfect. So it does sound like you're, in certain ways, you are trying to replicate the effort of the climb in training in a pretty specific way, as opposed to just building the engine that is going to be required on the day of?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm doing, in Malibu, the only difference is I have to coast. There is some flat miles or downhill in my training, so you're not doing a perfect simulation, but I'll go out in Malibu and do 5-hour rides, 10,000 feet, and I am stopping for a coffee, but yeah, for the most part, like that's the simulation I'm looking at trying to do. I knew it would be about 4,500 to 5,000 kilojoules in 4.5 hours, so that's what I was building up to in the sweet spot endurance training.
And you've had the same coach, Frank, for a long time, correct?
Forever, yeah, since 2014.
What do you think is like? You know enough, obviously, that if you needed to, you could coach yourself up to this type of effort. What do you see as the main benefit of working with Frank for something like this? Like, does he, I think for a lot of elite athletes like yourself, a coach, the primary benefit is they can put the brakes on you and keep you from overdoing it? Or is he a sounding board, or are you still learning new things from him all the time?
All of the above. I'm still learning from him because he's still learning from, we weren't eating carbs when I raced. Like
right.
It was 200 calories an hour, and like this always drives me nuts because this was not that long ago, 10 years ago when I was still World Tour, and I always performed well on, back then First Endurance had those flasks, and when they sponsored Bissell, it was just a flask of gel. That was my best year, and I was just pounding those all the time, and then go to a different team and they're like, okay, you're capped at 200 calories in your bottle, and here's your ham and cheese panini in the feed zone. Right. And I just did what I was told and what I had, and I didn't realize that I was probably sacrificing my own performance. It's just like what they give you is what you, and I honestly I assume they knew better, their World Tour, and that might be better for some guys back then, whatever. But yeah, sure enough, sugar and carbs are absolutely good fuel, and like somehow Ironman figured it out before the World Tour did. So here we are. Anyway, so yeah, Frank he's guided that. He's definitely a sounding board where I'm like, okay, what should the next 6 weeks look like volume-wise? The day before the thing, I'm looking at the last 2 times I attempted Mauna Kea, which involved a lot of walking. So a couple days before the effort, like I told Frank sort of roughly what week I was planning to perform, and leading into it, we were sort of looking at, here's my last time at Mauna Kea, here's Haleakala was a good example. That was a little over a year ago, and significantly shorter, but also just a long endurance ride. So that one I think I averaged like 300, and so Mauna Kea, it's like, all right, let's see if we can do 300 to this point, and then, so he helped me sort of set my power targets and my goals, and also just like sanity checks are always good, accountability.
Absolutely.
Yeah, keep me motivated.
You mentioned the power targets, and it's tough because there's such a wild change in weather conditions and elevation over the course of this. I imagine you're not just picking out a number. You average 270 watts for 4.5 hours. My guess is it doesn't look like 270. How much are you breaking the climb up and picking out different power targets for different segments of the climb?
I think I definitely knew it was going to go down because your threshold, I set my threshold, say that's 380 at the bottom at sea level, and then we're talking 330 by 7,000 feet, and giant question mark at 12 and 13, 14. But I think at some point I don't have to stare at the power meter. I sort of just knew, here's what the 300 watts felt like at the bottom is gonna feel like 270 in the middle, and then it just feels like all hell by the end.
At least by the end, you can kind of turn off that pacing brain a little bit and just say maybe you're emptying the tank here for the last whatever it is, 30 minutes.
Right. That's exactly right. Just the end of it is just it doesn't matter what I'm doing anymore. We're trying to get this on.
Right. You might not even know where you are at that point. It's,
right.
One
right.
foot in front of the other.
At the very end, you go around you've done the pavement part on the highway, you've done the dirt part, and then it's paved for the last. It ends up being like half an hour, and it's super steep. But like the last 100 meters, it wraps around, but there's also a left turn. Like I almost missed the turn. I was like about to turn left after 425 of suffering and just ruin the whole segment.
Yeah.
That's where the brain's at.
And I mean, really more like 6.5 of suffering, right? Because you tried to do it a first time and ran into some issues at the visitor's center.
Right. That's another thing with timing with all this is you can have, here's the day I plan to do it, but if God says no, then the answer is no. So there's a lot of times, especially with that one, like the conditions up there are crazy. You can get wild winds. So kind of my recommendation and my experience is go there, plan, I was there for 6 days, which gave me enough time for 2 attempts. Or if I had to just bail on the first one, just, you're stalking the weather forecast, like, all right, today's the day.
So you need to make travel arrangements and you're there for a week, but you haven't picked out a day specifically when you show up. You're more watching conditions and seeing when might be a clean day to do it.
Yeah, I had 2 days of, because there's so many logistics, I had 2 days of support booked, and kind of those 2 days were blocked out. But it was I was there long enough that it was going to be flexible. And it's just, if you go with most things, you can kind of, fingers crossed you don't have, it doesn't rain the day you were planning to do or whatever. But something like this, the odds are really good that it's going to get messy at some point. So I've learned that from just doing it a few times now.
So you were prepared for this. Was there anything that you changed during the second attempt where maybe this is a bit of a blessing in disguise? Like, maybe I went out a bit too hot there and I should back it off, or I should do something a little differently?
Only thing I did different was, my fueling was the same. My pace was, it was funny because my pace was exactly the same, but by the part where I turned around, I was 2 minutes slower on the day I actually finished. But my power was identical. It was just the wind does that. Yeah. And really, it just all comes down to the last 2 hours anyway, so I didn't care. But the only thing I did different was I did do ice socks, because it was harder than I expected at the bottom. Nice. And it wasn't hot, but it's just like if you can keep yourself cool for the first 2 hours, I think that probably was worth something at the end.
100%. And speaking of fuel, what are you trying to hit a certain amount of carbs per hour? Do you like to break it up between gels and drink? How do you do that?
I should know the carb math, but I don't. I just go by. So it was the EFS high carb. So that's 3 scoops in one bottle, and then I didn't want to litter out there, so I just squeezed a bunch of the liquid shots into flasks. So I would have a bottle every 45 minutes and a flask every 45 minutes. So probably that's a lot of carbs for sure, because I think it was like probably the equivalent of 3 or 4 shots in each of those.
Yeah, so I mean, and the bottle with 3 scoops would be 90 grams of carbs as well. So you're looking at, maybe 150 to 180 per hour.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Sounds about right. So big fueling. I mean, this is obviously a long effort, but I think it might still surprise some people to learn just how much is going into to fuel the engine.
Yeah, I assume it's similar to what folks do during Ironman. It's one thing that's also nice about Strava versus racing is you can control exactly how much you get and when. It's not like crap. I got to go back to the car and the race is splitting up. It's a nice controlled environment, especially I had a support car. I pulled out all the stops.
Because it's a controlled environment and because this is such a long climb, I mean, you're 4.5 hours, are you psychologically, from a pacing perspective, are you trying to stay really locked in the entire time, or are you looking in places, especially maybe early on, knowing that you've got this big emotional lift of the gravel and the steep finish? Are you trying to hit a bit of a flow state and tune out a little bit, focus on other stuff, take in your surroundings?
I'm definitely focused on the effort, but there's also, I don't know, the effort just doesn't take that much focus, I guess. Part of it, when I'm doing all these things, the priority is filming it. So I'm also directing the follow car and going back, like, make sure you get this shot, make sure you get that shot. Or pulling out, I have a little chest camera, I'll just like, all right, make sure I get that view. And I'm thinking about what I'm going to say in the video, in the voiceover after the fact. I'm thinking like, okay, let's mention, this turn here is important, or the headwind was this here. So, here's a bad headwind. Let me make sure I get the flag that's pinning me against the wall. So I'm checking boxes in my head of what needs to be filmed. And there's a lot of goats on the side of the road up there. So I made sure I got some goat content.
Everybody loves goats.
Yeah, they're adorable.
And I imagine this helps the time go by a little bit faster so that you don't get in that kind of spiral of just watching the power meter and watching seconds tick by.
Yeah, there's definitely like, I don't know, there's no denying how much time there's left, so that you can't like distract me from that. And it's always just like, it's nice how daunting it is, because it's just so backloaded on that climb. It's just so much harder once you get to 8,000 feet and the dirt section and the steep part. And the altitude. So it's all about just like staying relaxed and keeping within yourself, knowing like there's a lot left the whole time. Even after the dirt, there's a lot left. So it's just all about holding back. And yeah, I'm thinking about, I listen to music when I ride, or podcasts actually. I'd like my brain to be occupied. During a KOM, I don't. So I guess that must be a flow state, because it didn't, I can't tell you what went on for 4.5 hours.
Yeah, you kind of meditate your way up the volcano.
Yeah.
Is there an element of this climb that's maybe underrated in its difficulty? I mean, people always talk about the gravel. If you don't bring even when you did it the first time without a gravel bike, you have to walk there. The steep bit at the end, everybody knows about. But what are the sort of underrated elements of this climb that make it so difficult?
I mean, I think you kind of just hit them. The equipment. The first time I did it, it was Alex Candelario he and I were never teammates, but I raced with him a lot, and he was doing like guided tours then. So he was giving me the advice when I went out there, and I was on Garmin Sharp then. That was my last year world tour, and he was like, "Oh, dude, you're gonna need, it's dirt, but you're gonna need a gravel bike or a mountain bike for that dirt section." I remember thinking like, fuck off, Kando, I'm World Tour, I don't need that shit. Like, I'm going to be fine. I had 28C tires on my road bike, disc brakes. I was like, this bike is going to be, I can ride anything, man. You don't know how good I am. And then fast forward to like me definitely walking a lot. And I think even to, when I was doing the tire selection for this one, I was like, 35 should be fine. And then the last minute I was like, let's just put the 45s on. Let's just put the 45s on. And I still had to walk a little bit. And actually, in like the Strava comments and just conversation on Instagram with the video, someone commented like, it doesn't qualify for a KOM if you had to walk, and I replied like, actually, I don't think anyone's ever made it up here without walking. Like, I'm pretty sure. And 2 guys announced that they had, and I believe them. I'm sure it can be done if you get a good day and the dirt is packed or whatever. But I guess to answer your question, you can't underestimate just how wide the tires need to be, how easy the gearing needs to be, because you're at 16, 17%, and it's sandy.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to ask, is the main thing there is just like the depth of the sand we're talking about up there?
Yeah, you just have to respect that, like, there is nothing for your back tire to grip at that gradient when it's that loose. Yeah, you can't, it's definitely steep enough that you can't stand, you're not out of the saddle on a lot of the gravel bit. And I thought I was going to make it through, and then like literally I could see the pavement, the last bit, I had to unclip, and also just like it's hard to again, you're at 12,000 feet. It's hard to concentrate. It's hard to pick a line. It's easy to, there was one spot where I grabbed a bottle from the car, and just from that little bit of my arm was off, I kind of swerved off into the deeper part and had to save it. It's hard to explain how dumb you get at altitude.
You don't need to explain it to me. I've been there. When you're at 190 BPM, your brain really turns off.
Yeah.
And I would actually take, I guess, a different tack from the YouTube comment. I would say that it makes the KOM maybe more impressive because you'd obviously ride it if you could. You're being forced to do something slower for a couple minutes.
Yeah, no, the Strava purists are going to Strava purist. And there's also a debate if you switch bikes, it's not allowed. And if you don't, someone's like, you got a support car and that's against the thing. And it's like, at some point it gets to, if you didn't build a raft and sail to Hawaii under your own paddling, It doesn't qualify.
So I get into the territory of like the old Tour de France riders being DQ'd for welding their bike back together mid-stage because somebody was working the bellows for them.
So I go with like Strava has rules of their only rule is you can't motor pace, so you can draft in a 60-person peloton, which is more effective than motor pacing. But per Strava's whatever, I don't know where they even publish this, but I know you're not allowed to motor pace, which I agree with. But I also I do refuse to draft. That's the line that I've done because it's just slippery slopes trying to get somebody to pace me on these anyway. And then if you're drafting, like, what are you trying to prove? Like, what exactly is the point of any of this? Like, I'm not here to get KOMs. I'm here to do my best and tell a story, and I don't need to bring in a domestique for any of these. So I like to, here's a pure benchmark time that you can compare with yours on any climb that you see me on the leaderboard.
On the supplement front, you mentioned that it was a miracle you did not get sick on the other side of this, and I imagine it's a result of the big training block leading into it, plus the stress of the trip and multiple efforts. Do you put that mostly down to Multi-V Pro?
I mean, it's impossible to know with any of this stuff, but there was like a consistent pattern in my early to mid 20s when I was racing where you have your big training block and that builds up to a peak, a race, and after every race, and then, here's my race, I won, and without fail, I would be sick for 4 days, and it wouldn't be like, a flu. It was just I'm run down. It would just be like kind of cold symptoms. But I would have 3 or 4 of those every year, and then I went on Bissell, and that was the first time I worked with First Endurance, and that was the first time I couldn't afford a multivitamin before that anyway, but I was taking the Multi-V, and at the end of the year, someone was just like, "Do those work?" And I was like, "I don't know. Wait, I haven't gotten sick this year." It was just weird. Like, oh, hang on a second. Perhaps, and so since then I've been, religious about it. I can't prove what's fixed it, but I'm not changing that. So I've been a religious First Endurance user since then. I also loaded the Optogen leading into it for I don't use that one year round. I kind of do a sort of 2-3 week build leading up to it. So once I knew, like, all right, I have my tickets booked, this is roughly the date, I started doing 4 caps of those every day. And then I went back off it, but yeah, I was incredibly run down, and again, like, there's no way to leave Kona that's not a red eye. I'm carrying 2 bikes and dragging my wife's bike. She had one too across the airport, and I'm trying to destroy my body every which way. Right. And it was my birthday, so I got hammered with my friends the night I got back.
Sure.
And managed to not get sick. I didn't feel good, let's put it that way. I wasn't training my best the next week, but I was not like sniffling and going to the doctor.
Nothing a few extra naps can't fix.
Right.
That's a win-win too. You mentioned in your video, or I at least got a sense of, this is sort of like a full circle moment. It's an important KOM to you. You're tackling it on your 40th birthday. And it kind of felt like, if the World Tour is the first chapter of your career and this is the second, do you feel like the second chapter is kind of closed with achieving this goal? Or is it going to be kind of business as usual still this year?
It's definitely like a meaningful mark in whatever the chapters are. This was one, because Mauna Kea was, just to summarize for folks, it was the first climb I did. Well, it was my last day world tour when I did it, so that was sort of an emotional day regardless, and a good way to go out, and not intentional, but it was like, it wasn't my idea. I was just like, yeah, this is new, okay, why not? And then halfway up, I was like, oh, this is actually special and deserving of wherever I'm at in my weird life. And then because it sort of inspired and opened the doors to, I could still be a pro without being on a team. Essentially, it was what I didn't intentionally do, but that's what I learned over the next 10 years. So I always wanted to give that climb, A, the video it deserved after that, and B, like the right effort. And since I hadn't been able to do it with the right bike, with the right preparation, all that kind of stuff, like I'm 40, so I'm not as fast. I would have gone faster having the correct gear 10 years ago. Sure. But this is my best that I can do now, and I for sure emptied the tank and did all the preparation logistics right. So, but as far as like, I'm not gonna quit and get fat. I think the next chapter for me, I'm still going to be my best, as whatever that is, whatever that looks like. And I think the next chapter for me, if my last 10 years was showing that you can be a pro without being on a team, moving forward, it'll be you can be a pro without being fast, without being world class, being your best, whatever that is. So that's the chapter I'll be forced to try and blaze. As I get older.
I'm fully sympathetic to the fact that you have to start shifting the goalposts on yourself.
Yeah, my power output will never be as good as it was yesterday, and that's something that's like not fun to accept or deal with. But yeah, that'll be the next chapter for me. I think I always see like when I do Mount Washington Hill Climb, that's a good example because it's a race, but they're not all racers. It's people who they're locals and this is the goal and they do it every year. And because when you're a pro, you compare yourself to pros. But when you're in the real world, when you're on Strava, you look at man, my time was so look, I smashed that KOM, and you look down 45 seconds. Well, that's a dentist, And then you look down Mount Washington, yeah, I won. I set a new record or whatever, and that guy did it 45 minutes slower, but he's 65. And that's the next step. That's just that's the real endurance, is people who can do something another 20 years on top of where I'm far more impressed by that than I would be someone who goes 2 or 3 seconds past my time, tomorrow.
Do you imagine that the types of KOMs you're hunting for change as you turn 40? Because you probably are keeping that aerobic efficiency maybe a little bit better, obviously, than your top end, your VO2. Do you see yourself going for more of these longer, more diesel-y KOMs just as a result of age?
Yes and no. I guess it's not as a result of age. It's just as a result of that's what's interesting. Yeah. Going for a 3-minute climb, that's a cool video. There's not much story to tell on a lot of those. So I guess the beginning of my Worst Triathlon Ever stuff was people wanted to see what time I could do or a pro could do on their local whatever. So I went to Lookout Mountain in Denver, got that KOM. There was kind of a lot of those. And I think, I just did that for kind of all the major segments. I've done all those. The benchmarks have been set and explained, in a lot of cases passed. So now it's kind of the exploration of finding a climb that's interesting, that has a story to it. And those are actually going to be longer. So I'm looking at Mauna Kea is, the longest climb in the world. It's the hardest climb in the world that we know of. But there's some weird stuff in South America that, I don't know how high I don't know what the pavement situation is. I'm on Google Earth. Okay, is that one even safe? Is that all 18-wheelers through, long tunnels?
Yeah, I've seen footage from, is it Letras in Colombia, that looks cool looking climb, but it also looks absolutely harrowing from a traffic
Letras I've done. That one's not bad. The one that's harrowing for traffic is Patios, right outside of Bogota, and that one's shorter. I got the KOM on that, and I'd had to put a foot down because there was an 18-wheeler that cut me off. I still got it. Since then, that was 29. That was beginning of 2020 I got that, and in the pandemic that became every Colombian pro's thing. So now Nairo has it or something, but...
Well, and according to the purist, you did put a foot down, so yours never counted.
That's right, yeah, because I had to hike a bike. But you're going in that, you're just breathing motorcycle fumes, and they don't have catalytic converters down there.
Yeah.
Or at least they're not. There was a truck protest, so that was a different kind of story and adventure. But yeah, there's a whole world of other stuff that's not just like. I'm going to definitely have to pivot away from. Look how many watts I can do, and I could still put the heart rate in the music and the power, and like I'm doing 450 for a while, and that looks impressive to everyone but me. That's still in me for a couple more years, but yeah, I'm gonna have to go back to the drawing board on. Really, I'm looking at like South America, Mexico, Asia, Africa. I've never been to Africa.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think I see you laying the groundwork for some of this transition too. I mean, you're an English major, right? Back in undergrad, there is a storytelling element that I think you're bringing some more of into the more recent videos, whether it's cultural stuff about wherever you happen to be, a narrative, for instance, like about Mauna Kea when you're doing it on your last day as a pro and then coming back on your 40th birthday. You bring a little botany into it with your wife, right?
Right.
So that's kind of what prompted this question, because it does look like you're sort of diversifying the channel a little bit in a way that is really quite compelling.
I would love to. It'd be much easier edit if it was just, here's me at the bottom, here's some voiceover, here's what it felt like, here's how I paced. But I'm not a pro anymore. I don't even find that interesting. And I do want to talk about the culture, and I do want people to know about the food. And so I've always wanted it to be more Anthony Bourdain, more like, here's what this place is like, here's what these people are like, here's a funny interview. And it's fun to. I guess it's funny and humbling to see how some of my favorite videos are the ones that people do not click on. I'm just like, oh, this was so funny. I wrote this out. I got these really cool shots, and it was like me and two buddies touring. One of my favorite videos, I did a video with Phil Rosenthal, the Everybody Loves Raymond creator, and he brought me to like his favorite restaurant, and we had a cookie, and he's super funny, obviously. He has like a Netflix show now. And like, so he was super funny, and the video was fun, and we actually had like somebody actually shooting it, and it just, nobody clicked on it. And I mean, it got some views, it did fine, but for my channel it was bad. And whereas I could just go over to a hill you haven't heard of, and I could do 450 watts the whole way up it, and it's 5 minutes from my house, and I got the chest cam on, and that's gonna do better. And it's like, well, all right. The good news is I can do both.
Yeah,
but,
I guess there's a little bit of market pressure in there. But, I mean, personally, and for us at First Endurance, we love the new direction and are here for whatever pivot you're making. And we're just glad to be, associated with the journey wherever it goes.
Yeah, I appreciate that. There's still going to be performance and sweat. So even if I'm going much slower up Mauna Kea on my 60th birthday.
Yeah, never gets easier. You just go a little slower. As you
yeah, that's something like that, right? Yeah.
Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time. Thank you again so much for joining us and talking through some of this stuff with us. It was really informative for me, hopefully for everybody else as well. Take care.
Of course, no, thanks for the support. I always say, like, First Endurance is my longest running sponsor. And there's been some back and forth, because when you're a pro, you don't get to decide. But after that year on Bissell, I'm on Garmin Sharp, and here's, your new sponsors and your new whatever. And under the table, Mike Fogarty would always just like send me some of the vitamin, some of the multi V. And when I retired, and I was like, well, I was supposed to get a job, but that didn't happen. But every month I was like, man, I need to find a new sponsor for whatever the heck I'm doing just to get me through to when my job starts, which it never did. But First Endurance was the first one I called, and he was like, yeah, I don't know what this is, but sure, I'm in.
I love it.
Yeah, I'm glad to have made it pay off for all of us. But the ones who take a gamble, I appreciate it.
Appreciate you. Cheers, Phil.
Thanks.